the water podium. Okay. Good morning. So happy birthday, Creative Mornings. I have a birthday, a pretty interesting birthday factoid that I just found out about the other day. Since very recently, let me start again. Today, 10,000 Americans are turning 65. 10,000 Americans are having their 65th birthday today. That's thanks to the baby boomer generation, obviously, and that's going to happen for the next 19 years. So that's pretty amazing. It's a lot of birthdays. So I thought Creative Mornings is having a birthday, as are 10,000 elders. Yeah. So I remember the moment I realized I was mortal, and I blame the kids that I have still today. They were little enough that I could see them growing up in front of my very eyes. Who's got kids? Okay, lots. Some of us have kids in here. And if you're like me, you've had a moment where you almost could see from one day to the next the kids getting older, especially when they're in like the 6 months to 3 years time frame. And I remember it was a beautiful day in Northampton. I was just about to start my architecture degree program at UMass Amherst, and it like hit me like a ton of bricks that someday these kids, God willing, would be 40. And then like the next thought was, I'll be 70 something. And it was like, yes, that's an epiphany we all have probably had before, but I realized I was going to die someday. Yeah. Because, grad school, for me anyway, was a luxury. I imagine lots of us here have degrees in design. And for me, it was like this time to be able to just do a deep dive into something. A human system. Yes, buildings are involved and the built environment is involved, but really it was about like human systems. And so I, thanks to my kids, started looking into the funeral industry because I just really hadn't thought about what I would do with my body when I died. And right away realized that for the most part, sort of niche stuff aside, we have two options when we die. And like from a design perspective, I was kind of unimpressed by that. There are many different types of people. Let's just focus on the US for now. There's many different types of people, very diverse interests. Like just looking around this room, it's weird that we only have two options for our bodies when we die. So from a design perspective, I thought, that's kind of weird. And then when I looked a little closer, I started to realize that both of these, conventional burial and cremation, both of these options, really leave it so that the last thing you'll do to the planet that supported you your whole life is harm it. Like, if you go with the status quo, which believe me is the easiest thing to do at this point, the very last thing we'll do on this earth is poison it. And so, in a similar way, I was very disappointed with that. I thought, that is sad. There has to be a better way. Oh, yeah. So, guess what the better way is? It's nature. So, I was really lucky when I started thinking about this problem of our current funeral industry and wondering if there was a way to incorporate nature into the design of another way. Not the only way, just another way to care for bodies after we die. I had a friend who knew I was thinking about this stuff and called me one morning. And this is why, by the way, I believe in epiphanies, because this was mine. She called me and said, Katrina, have you heard about the farmers that have been composting whole cows? I always almost say live when I tell that little story. They are not composting live cows. That is a whole different project that I'm not prepared to work on. But no, for a long time, a couple decades at least, farmers have been composting whole animals when they die, and if they can't go to the slaughterhouse. And it's really, it's really very simple when you get down to it, and it's exactly what's happening on the forest floor. It's a symphony of carbon and nitrogen and oxygen that breaks down organic material and creates soil. And so when my friend called me and told me about that, it occurred to me just immediately that we could certainly do that with humans as well. So that was really the sort of like the beginning moment of this journey, which really has been a journey at this point. And let's see if that timer's going down. Okay. And so I started then to really try to incorporate that concept into my design work. And I'll just say again, for the beauty of a design school for me was none of my professors said, don't forget to think about, working on a thesis project. This became my thesis project. And not one of my professors said, well, what's the business model, right? And not one of them said, well, what's your budget? Because I don't know about your architecture schools, but our professors weren't asking us to think about budgets. And they didn't even really say, like, does anyone want this, or could it stand up? Which arguably you might want to ask as a professor of architecture, but like, what was beautiful about it was I was designing something that I thought should exist, and that was really the only parameter. So this is one of the first times I've tried to tell this little piece of the story, which is that I designed a concept in grad school for my thesis project. And at the end of it all, my professors and my friends and family were like, yeah, this should exist. And so then I spent a few years working on that design. And I don't know if any of you have seen it out and about, but it was a vertical core system about 2.5 stories tall, and ramps wrapped around that core. Friends and family would carry the dead to the top of the core, lay the body into wood chips, and over the next 30 days or so, the body transforms into soil. So that, I think I might have failed in that concept, actually. I'm just starting to realize. So I think I held on to it a little too long. People were really encouraging about it, which is why I kept going. But when I look back at the reality of that design, it may have been not the best one. Okay, that's all right. That happens. But I did spend a lot of time working on that particular design, and so I've recently been thinking a lot about that. What does it mean to spend too much time on something? Like, I guess it's okay. We all have plenty of time, all the time in the world, right? So that was a very awkward transition to the next slide, which is the new design. So what we've been working on for the past 9 months or so is a vessel system. The idea with the vessel system is one body, 30 days, a bunch of natural materials in there with you. And during that time span, your body will break down bones, teeth, and flesh, and nutrient-rich soil is created. I switched from the vertical core system to a vessel system because, and for some of you it's going to be really obvious, it's modular. It's much simpler to implement. We can fit this type of system in lots of different building types. I already said it's modular, but I think that's really important. We can have different sizes and scales of this system. And one of the benefits of it as well is the system I was working with before was collective. So bodies, though they were placed in individually, would essentially be in a part of a collective decomposition process. And there were lots of people who found that hard to swallow. So we've kind of gained a bunch of people, a bunch of fans who are like, oh, this individual system, I get this, it feels a little more comfortable, for better, for worse. So the basic concept here is, again, very much like what's happening on the forest floor. You have wood chips, oxygen, and a body. And really what we're doing is creating the right environment for nature to do its job. And by nature, I'm talking about microbes and bacteria, the beneficial kind. And these guys work to break down the body and the wood chips, creating this really incredible dark brown soil, just like what's on the screen, that friends and family can then go use to grow new life. I think I would say that that this system and the process of turning bodies into soil is almost just the hook for me. I started disappointed with the current options of conventional burial and cremation, and I ended up also being disappointed with the lack of ritual and ceremony we have. And part of that's due to cremation becoming so much more popular and it really being kind of transactional. Just like, here's the body, here's the ashes. You can make something happen with it, but you don't have to. It's pretty like stripped of ritual, right? And so this system, this vessel system, is really just the heart and the hook of what we're trying to do, which is bring ritual back to the death care experience. And so there's 3 words that my team, we're kind of like loving right now when we do the work, when we design anything from what is now a business model to the vessel itself. And the 3 words are intention, participation, and transparency. And intention, it almost seems obvious. Like as designers, we like to be intentional about every single thing, from the font to the doorknob. But it's helpful for us to just remember that the funeral industry in the current paradigm doesn't always have intention with everything that's done. So how can we bring that to the experience? And transparency, we want to be honest about what's happening, and we believe that friends and family have the capacity to know and to participate, which is the 3rd word. So the other thing we're trying to do is really create an experience for the grieving where they can have hands-on, participate in the experience of laying a loved one into that vessel, come back, get the soil after 30 days, and then go and plant a tree if you wish. So, oh yeah, we finally calculated. I don't know, who is a carbon metric ton nerd? Does anyone care about the tonnage of carbon? Raise your hand if you care about, okay. I'm starting to. I mean, I care in theory, I didn't really understand what a metric ton of carbon was for a long time. Okay. Just for the nerds, every time someone is recomposed instead of cremated or buried, we'll save a metric ton of carbon from being emitted, which is great. I think also for me it's more about creating stewards of the earth, people who are thinking even now about our deaths down the way, realizing that we are connected to the natural cycles, and then kind of like doubling down on our efforts, right, to make things better. So the process that we've invented is called Recomposition. I want to give full credit to my mom for this name because she came up with it. And because I was like, we need a name for like what's happening. We used to say, I'm not even really supposed to say this because it's live streaming or whatever, but we used to say human composting. You're like, no, don't ever say that again. I know, I say that I'm never going to say it again, but then I say it as part of the story. We're not saying it anymore. It's not what's happening at all. We're recomposing. But so my mom was the one who thought up this word, and in the dictionary it says to recompose as in music, which I like a lot. So this is as in a body into soil. And one of the cool things that I find so so powerful about this process is we cease to be human during it. So bodies are transformed fully, and we return to the natural cycle. And some people say that's a little bit scary for them to hear, but I think it's pretty soothing, actually. Oop. I'm wrapping up, and we'll have lots of time for Q&A, but I just want to say, and this is, again, obvious to anyone in here who works creatively, but having the idea is one thing. It's just the beginning. And then everything else is the team. And what I didn't realize in grad school, thinking about creating a new system for our dead, is that would involve legal policy work. It would involve lots of science and rigorous research. It would involve communications, more design, lots more design, planning the operations of a facility that would house these vessels, lots and lots of pieces. And it just so happens that there are people out there that I get to work with that can help me do that. So this is just a piece of our team, but I've been really psyched to work with this group of people that I would never have met otherwise. Like my soil scientist there, Dr. Carpenter Boggs, she's out in Pullman. This is her thing. She has been doing this work with animals for, I think, 12 years now. And we got together, and now we're doing it together. We're figuring it out for humans. So I really am so lucky for the team. And then, just to give you a sense, I mean, this is not a very pretty slide, but just to give you a sense of what are we actually trying to do. We've been working on our proof of concept, our communications, getting the word out that this will soon be available. And I've been working for 3 years after founding the Urban Death Project, a nonprofit, worked under that vehicle. We've been getting a fair amount of press. We've got a fair amount of press for that work. And if you look it up, it's all of the initial design. And now I recently founded a benefit corporation, a B Corp, and we're about to start a pilot program out at Washington State University where we'll recompose 10 to 12 donors, human donors, to prove that this is an effective and sustainable method of death care. And once we've done that, the really big one, I think the biggest challenge we're going to have in the next 2 years is we're then going to bring this idea to the Washington State legislature and say, hey, here's another way that bodies should be cared for after they die. If people choose, if people want more choice, we want to provide one more option. And so that's the big thing coming up for us. That'll be next session, like 2019, January. After that, we're going to open the first facility here in Seattle. And that's a whole nother challenge that I haven't even quite touched yet. It's like a few years out. So really it's about like, what's the next thing? But this is our plan. This is what I'm trying to do. My weird thesis project totally 100% turned into my life's work. So weird. I didn't ever think that would happen. But it's happening because so many people are interested in it and want this as a choice. So, yeah. I think that wraps up my story for you today. Yeah, I'm really excited to hear your questions. And I think we might be doing a little in-betweener. Yeah, so thank you very much.
So, no, you can wait. Before we dive into Q&A, we're going to take a little break and do some jazzercise. And no, I'm just kidding about that part. We're actually going to take a little break and have you guys spend some time talking amongst yourselves. So, did you have a suggestion on the topic? Because I do if you don't. Yours is better, I promise you. So good. Okay, that's okay. That's why we're here. So that's good. Okay, so we'll give you. Thank you. We'll give you a choice. Very diplomatic of you. Okay, so what we want you to do is to find a group of maybe like less than 10 people, 3 to 7-ish around you, and we're going to spend 5 minutes and just talking amongst yourselves on a topic which might include either A,
think about your body and how you move through the world on this planet. Assume you will die someday. And talk about what you want to happen to that body of yours.
And my question, or my topic for you, is how do you feel about ritual after death? So there you go. You get two choices there. You get 5 minutes, and then after that we'll come back and do Q&A for 10, 15 minutes or so, and then we'll turn you loose so you can go back to your work. All right?
Okay, we're going to answer questions now. You can talk more about your untimely demise after this is over. It's a beautiful way to start a Friday. Yes?
What are the inputs that go into this recomposing process, and then how is the result of decomposing different than what would happen should you just bury a body in the ground?
The question was, what are the inputs that go into recomposing, and how are the outputs different than what would happen if you put a body in the ground? And also thank you for asking that, because it was pointed out to me that I forgot to mention natural burial at all. I usually try to kind of wrap it in a little bit when I'm talking about this. Natural burial, for those of you who don't know, is when a body goes directly into the ground without embalming, typically in a shroud or a pine box. It's a lot like the Jewish tradition and, in fact, the Muslim tradition. And it is practiced in the US in some places. It was an inspiration for my work in part because, well, I love the concept, but I was thinking, there's so many of us that live in urban centers. Could we really have natural burial as a solution for all of us in cities? And so in a way, recomposition is my response to that, sort of like the urban equivalent. Okay, the inputs are wood chips. Some other materials like alfalfa is one of them that we were sort of playing with. And oxygen. Oxygen is key because it's an aerobic process that's happening. And the output is, let's see, that's a really good question. Depending on where you bury a body in the ground, and depending on the soil quality, like if it's, and the amount of moisture in the soil, and the amount of air that's able to get into the soil, you have very different things that happen underground if a body is buried in the ground. So in western North Carolina, where I've spent some time working with human cadavers, a body underground will decompose in about a year, maybe a little more, because it's very rich, very kind of porous, earthy soil underground. But if you buried someone in New Mexico, say, where it's dry and arid, there might be a desiccation, a drying, and almost a mummification that happens. So the decomposition would be very slow, or maybe that wouldn't happen at all. So it really depends. But basically what we're creating by recomposing people is a very consistent, like a bag of topsoil that you would buy at your local nursery. And so, yeah, so I guess it just depends on where you bury a body. But this might be similar to what you'd find in a very rich, loamy soil after a series of years. Yes?
What happens to the toxins in the body that apparently throughout a lifetime we collect toxins at various times, and whether we put it in the ground or in the air, toxins remain. So what happens in this system?
The question was about toxins and that we accumulate in our bodies and what happens to them in the process. We're still figuring out some things, and by the way, our partners at Washington State University Soil Science Department. And sort of one of the answers is that the compost process, which this process is based on, does actually do a lot of work with toxins, including harmful pathogens. And that is because of the extreme heat created during the process. This is a hydrothermal, what am I saying? Thermophilic. Whew, get all over the place this morning. A thermophilic process, so the temperatures are between 130 and 160 degrees Fahrenheit that these microbes produce by their activity. And so that is one of the ways that toxins are handled. And then, yeah, that's the main one.
I know of another project that uses mushroom spores.
Oh, yeah.
That are particularly designed or found
Yeah, the mushroom burial suit. I love that one. Yeah, and if we, I mean, certainly if we found that that would be an additional help, we would love to partner with the mushroom burial suit. But right now the microbes do a lot of the work for us. So, yes.
Is there anything that would cause a body to be not accepted into the program?
Is there anything that would cause a body to be not accepted into the program? For our pilot program, we will not accept bodies with pacemakers. Down the road, pacemakers will be removed before they go into the vessel. That's similar to cremation, actually. You don't cremate a body with a pacemaker because I think the pacemaker explodes or something. And yeah, so let me think. For the pilot, again, there are some communicable diseases that we're that's it. Down the road, we'd really like to be able to accept everybody. Yeah.
There are other metal parts.
Oh yeah, so part of our process will be a screening of non-organics after the soil is created. So titanium hips and golden teeth, that's okay. All those things. Yes? Mm-hmm. That's a great question. So the question was about there's not a lot of urban areas where you can do something with a big bag of topsoil. What is your proposed ritual around that? And I've always seen it sort of three ways. So we don't know for sure, but it's going to be at least a cubic yard of soil. So that is a pretty good amount. And what we want to do is first offer that to family and friends. If they want to take it all, they can. If they want to take just a little bit, they can, to go grow something or put it in a locket around your neck. I mean, there's lots of ways you can celebrate that. The second is to have gardens on site. Whatever our first site is, we'll definitely have gardens, hopefully inside and out, with some of that growing the life on site. And then my long-term vision has always been like, city parks. And so then you could look up which city park your person's soil went to in April 2026 and find out, oh my gosh, suddenly volunteer park has more significance to me. So that might be a little more of a bureaucratic lift, but that would be my goal. And in the meantime, probably conservation land will benefit from it. Yes. That is a nice question. How can I help, and do you need any help? It's also a really hard question sometimes, especially I imagine all these creatives in the room. I think I would ask you to go to recompose.life and sign up for updates, and then or get in touch with me and tell me your skill set. Because we will continue to need more help over time, but we don't have any very good volunteer opportunities right now. Yeah. Yes?
I can only imagine that the funeral lobby is freaking out, and what are they doing to prepare for?
The question was about the funeral lobby, and are they freaking out, and what are we doing to prepare? I'm just going to look at the time so I understand. Okay. The funeral industry, that could be a whole nother talk that I would do without live streaming it in a closed room. It would be super fun. I think there's like a lot of different types of people in the funeral industry. I think I am super lucky to work with the awesome ones. There's a lot of people trying to do different types of alternative death care, from death doulas to the natural burial movement, I'll make a plug right now for the Co-op Funeral Home of People's Memorial, which is here in Seattle. Become a member. It's $50 once for life. And we work with them all the time. So there's great funeral directors and funeral homes. And then I think there's a lot of funeral industry folks who are just like, la 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 la, like just think this is just too weird. And so that's been a benefit. So we'll keep being weird, I guess. Yeah. Yes?
So my luck, it would turn out that my soil would be composed primarily of caffeine and cynicism and whatever would die, and it would be a real drag.
there's nothing wrong with blackberries, first of all. That's fine. Okay, the question was, what if your soil is contaminated with caffeine and cynicism? And then the tree you plant withers and dies. This might be TMI, but when my second child was born, we buried his placenta in the backyard under a tree, and it withered and died. So you just it's just part of life. You have to let it go. Yeah, yes?
In our small group, a question came up from Larry that I want him to ask, but the one I wanted to ask you was about the modularity now that it's not one thing. Are you expecting to have a single facility with these modules? And are the modules also possibly going to be able to go into new construction as parts of communities? Or?
Yeah, so the question was about the modular system and how it would be implemented. And I think part of that will remain to be seen, like as we continue to develop it, what makes the most sense. I definitely have my eye on the vision of the flagship facility here in Seattle being able ideally to serve something like 1,000 families, which is, depending on some of the work we're doing now, going to be around 75 of these vessels. So that's a larger facility. I think there's definitely opportunity for smaller and even singular modules to happen. And we have right now people from various cities around the country that have been in touch, and the world I should say, that have been in touch saying like, how can we implement this? So that's definitely one of the things we're thinking about is what's the best way to spread this idea once we're all finished designing? Yeah. Yes.
Just before I ask the question, when you said coffee and cynicism, you know what it made me think of? The Rufus Wainwright selling cigarettes and chocolate milk.
Yeah.
I've had to be the executive for several worlds in my life, and I haven't always been able to perform death rituals in the way that I personally might have, because you're expected to follow the will. What, if any, perception by religious communities do you expect when you devise this ritual process? Will they feel co-opted? Have you given any thought to that aspect of your model?
The question was about religious groups and have we thought about that, incorporating that into the model with the ritual? And the answer is yes. The first answer is pretty, I think, interesting. I always initially thought this would be something that would be very against many religions, but what I'm coming to realize is there are actually few religions for whom this would be not acceptable, depending a little bit about how you or your religious leader interpret your faith. So the Jewish religion is a good example where bodies are buried in the ground in a pine box, and in fact, often soil is put into the casket because the idea is to return to the earth as soon as possible. You can see how for some rabbis this is a fit for that model. It's about returning to the earth. It's about becoming soil. But not for all. It just is going to depend a little bit. I think the Catholic religion is pretty interesting. It allowed cremation in the 60s, and with the caveat that you can't spread the ashes, that ashes have to be buried in a cemetery, and so that the body stays together. And so I guess you could also say, well, this might be a fit for some in the Catholic faith as well. But then more broadly, in terms of creating a space in Seattle where people have ceremony, we want to be able to kind of easily and sort of be very flexible about what's being celebrated there. And there's no reason not to incorporate religion or particular faith during the ceremony. Does that make sense? Yes.
Have you partnered with any celebrities? I know that sounds weird, but like big time A-listers that could get your, like I know this might sound strange, but Angelina Jolie comes to mind, or she's into the ritual stuff, and then some other like serious A-listers, like maybe even like is it Jessica Alba that has her honest company that's like a natural company? I don't know. I just wonder if you considered that, because they're great for getting the word out.
Yeah. The question was, have I partnered with celebrities? The answer is no. And have I thought about it? Yeah, I thought maybe Susan Sarandon would be really cool. But someone like I would love to have someone on the elder side. I don't know if she's an elder, but like just okay. versus someone. I mean, I'm totally love millennials and find a lot of interest by millennials in this idea, which is awesome that people are thinking about death not only when they're 75 or someone's died that they know. But anyway, yeah, if you know anyone. Okay. Way in the back. Yeah, that's such a good question. We're still working on the precise. Oh, thank you. What is the cost compared to other options? So the average conventional burial with a casket, etc., in the United States is around $10,000, and that doesn't usually include a plot, which can range up to $35,000 to $50,000, depending on where we're trying to buy it, because you're essentially trying to buy a piece of land. So, of course, think about that. A small piece of land that you'll own for eternity. So, which is weird in itself. And then a cremation with funeral is about $6,200 average. You can get a very inexpensive cremation. So if you want that, you should be looking at the, maybe it's here $10,000 to $1,500. Okay, so that's sort of the basic landscape. And then what we want, our goal is to create a really sustainable business that is able to spread and pay our people really well, because they'll be trained in a really interesting way that's a little unlike the current funeral industry, where they'll be trained to help families participate. That's a lot of stuff to say. We're still working on the numbers, but I think we'll be able to certainly come in under conventional burial, and we'll probably have a couple of different ranges for the sort of like the amount of ritual or ceremony you want. I think I've heard from many people, they don't really want to even come there, they just want to be turned into soil, and so that should be an option as well. Yeah, right there.
So you mentioned soil as an output, but when you compost things, you also get gases and off-gassing. Can you talk a little about that and how the modules collected or let it out?
You know, I don't actually think I'm really qualified to answer that. So I've never had that question before. The question was about off-gassing during the process, and how composting creates gas. I know that methane is created during an anaerobic process when there's not enough oxygen, but we won't have that situation because we're very carefully monitoring. So I don't know. Again, not qualified to answer very fully. So if you want to get in touch with me after, I can connect you to someone who can. But I know that part of it is our sort of like highly. Because we are so carefully, as opposed to a compost pile out in your backyard that you forget about sometimes and forget to turn and forget to aerate, we're doing the opposite, where we're very carefully monitoring everything. So, yeah. One more question. I don't know how. I think you've had your hand up for a long time.
So my intention is to donate my body to like a cadaver lab.
Mm-hmm.
Now, am I still eligible after that stint?
The question was, if you donate your body to a cadaver lab, can you still be eligible to be recomposed? And the answer is no, because cadaver labs embalm. So you can't, that was another thing. You cannot be embalmed and then be recomposed, because embalming is where the bodily fluid is removed. Embalming fluid is put into your body so that it slows decomposition down. We don't want to do that. We want to encourage it to happen. You could, however, donate your organs and then be recomposed, because we want to facilitate that sort of thing. But donation to a cadaver lab wouldn't work. Oh, thank you all so much, and please sign up. Thank you. Yeah, and find me on Instagram and Twitter, please. Thank you, and thank you.